Marcus Vale stood at the viewport of his ship, the Shadowhawk, watching the crystalline spires of the Centaurian capital glitter beneath him. The city stretched endlessly across the planet's surface, a testament to the Empire's power and wealth. But Marcus knew better than most that beauty often masked darkness. A holographic message flickered to life in his cabin. Emperor Nexus's image materialized, tall, imposing, with iridescent scales that shifted colors in the light and 4 arms adorned with ceremonial markings. His multifaceted eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intensity. "Mr. Vale," the Emperor's voice resonated with artificial warmth. "Your reputation precedes you. The finest human operative in 3 sectors, they say." Marcus maintained his professional mask, earned through 15 years of wet work across the galaxy. "You're well-informed, Your Imperial Majesty. Though I prefer problem solver to operative." "Indeed." The Emperor's scales flickered to a deeper blue. "I have a problem that needs solving. 2 problems, to be precise. My daughters, Lyra and Celeste, have become inconvenient." Marcus's expression didn't change, though his stomach tightened. Royal assassinations were messy, complicated affairs. "Inconvenient how?" "They lead a growing rebellion against my rule." Nexus's voice hardened, spreading dangerous ideas about democracy, equality, resource sharing. They turned several outer systems against me. Examples must be made. "Your own daughters." Marcus kept his tone neutral, gathering information. "They ceased being my daughters when they betrayed their heritage." Nexus spat. "I want them eliminated. Publicly. Let the galaxy see what happens to those who challenge the Empire." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind already calculating angles, risks, and contingencies. "My fee will be substantial. Credits are no object. Name your price." After negotiating terms, Marcus ended the transmission and began reviewing the intelligence files. Lyra and Celeste had established their base on Novara, a mining colony on the Empire's fringe. Their movement had grown from a few hundred supporters to thousands in mere months. The sisters themselves were fascinating subjects. Lyra, the elder, was a tactical genius who had graduated top of her class at the Imperial War College before turning against her father. Celeste was a gifted technomancer, able to interface with and control technology in ways that even the Empire's best scientists couldn't explain. As Marcus piloted the Shadowhawk toward Novara, he couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. Something about this contract felt wrong. He killed his share of corrupt politicians, crime lords, and corporate tyrants, people who'd earned their fate. But these sisters were fighting against oppression, trying to build something better. He pushed the thoughts aside. Sentiment was dangerous in his line of work. He had a contract to fulfill. Landing on Novara under the cover of darkness, Marcus easily infiltrated the rebel base. His enhanced reflexes and stealth systems made short work of the security measures. Soon he was deep inside their command center, moving silently through shadowed corridors. He found them in the strategic planning room. Lyra stood before a holographic map, her scaled skin shimmering with subtle patterns as she gestured at various tactical positions. Her movements were precise, elegant. Celeste sat cross-legged on a console, her hands dancing through the air as she manipulated streams of data with her technomantic abilities. Marcus raised his pulse rifle, sights aligned perfectly. 2 quick shots, and the contract would be complete. But he hesitated, listening to their conversation. "The mining families are starving," Lyra, Celeste was saying. "The Empire takes everything they dig up and leaves them with nothing. We have to move soon." "I know," Lyra replied. "But we have to be smart about this. One wrong move and Father's forces will slaughter them all. These people trust us to protect them." Marcus lowered his weapon slightly. Their words stirred memories he tried to bury. His own family struggles in the human colonies, watching the wealthy take everything while workers suffered. His movement caught Celeste's attention. She spun, eyes widening. "We have company." Marcus could have taken the shot. Instead, he stepped into the light, weapon pointed at the floor. Your father sent me to kill you." Lyra moved protectively in front of her sister. "And yet we're still breathing." "Why?" "Because I want to hear your side of the story," Marcus replied. "Convince me you're fighting for something worth dying for." The sisters exchanged looks. Then Lyra smiled, a gesture that transformed her fierce features into something almost human. "We'll do better than that. We'll convince you it's something worth living for." Marcus knew in that moment that he'd already made his choice. The contract was void. A new chapter was beginning, one that would shake the Empire to its foundations. The Revel base hummed with activity as Marcus put another group of fighters through their paces. 3 weeks had passed since he'd chosen to betray his contract, and he'd spent every moment transforming the rebels from idealistic civilians into a fighting force. "You're dead," he said flatly, helping the young Centaurian miner up from the training mat. "Never telegraph your moves. The Empire's soldiers won't give you a second chance." From her observation post, Lyra watched with arms crossed, her scales shifting through patterns that Marcus had learned to read as thoughtful concern. Beside her, Celeste's fingers danced through the air, manipulating holographic training data. "They're improving," Lyra noted as Marcus approached. "But will they be ready?" "They'll have to be," Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Your father's patience won't last forever. When he realizes I've turned, he'll send others." Celeste's eyes flickered with technological interfaces only she could see. "Speaking of which, I've intercepted some interesting transmissions. The Emperor has doubled the bounty on our heads and added you to the list, Marcus." He smiled grimly. "Only doubled? I'm almost insulted." The sisters had proven to be far more than simple rebels. Lyra's tactical genius had transformed their scattered resistance into a coordinated movement. Planetary governors and military officers who had secretly opposed Nexus were now reaching out, offering support. Meanwhile, Celeste's technomantic abilities gave them an edge that even the Empire's best security couldn't counter. But it was more than their capabilities that had convinced Marcus he'd made the right choice. He saw how they treated their people, not as subordinates, but as equals. Every decision was weighed against its human and Centaurian cost. "We've received word from the Helios system," Lyra said, pulling up a star chart. "The mining colonies there are ready to revolt, but they need our help to overcome the Imperial garrison." Marcus studied the tactical overlay. "It's risky. We'd be extending ourselves thin, and your father's forces could cut us off from our supply lines." "The risk is worth it," Celeste countered, her voice passionate. "Those colonies have some of the worst conditions in the Empire. Children working 16-hour shifts in the deep mines, families living on protein paste while the Empire ships out precious metals by the ton." Marcus noticed Lyra watching him intently. "What aren't you telling me?" She hesitated, then gestured for him to follow. They walked to a private chamber where Lyra activated a security field. "There's more at stake than the mines. The Helios system contains something far more valuable. A cache of ancient technology. If we can reach it before my father, it could change everything." The implications hit Marcus hard. "That's why you've been pushing your technomantic abilities so hard," he said to Celeste. "You're hoping to interface with the cache." She nodded, her eyes glowing with possibility. The Ancient Ones had technology that could reshape worlds, create energy from nothing. In the right hands, it could end scarcity across the galaxy. In my father's hands, he'd be unstoppable. Marcus finished. The sisters' proximity was distracting. Over the past weeks, he'd grown increasingly aware of them. Lyra's quiet strength, Celeste's fierce brilliance. The way their scales caught the light, how their movements carried an alien grace that fascinated him. He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on strategy. "We'll need a diversion," he said. "Something big enough to draw your father's attention away from Helios." Lyra's scales rippled with excitement. "I have an idea about that. The Imperial Palace's security network has a weakness, one that Celeste discovered but we've been saving for the right moment." "We can blind their defensive systems," Celeste explained, her fingers already weaving complex patterns. Create chaos in the capital itself. While they're scrambling to respond, our main force strikes at Helios. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's not just risky. It's practically suicide. The palace defenses are legendary. That's why we need you to lead the palace strike team, Lyra said softly. There's no one else we trust with this. The word trust hung in the air between them. Marcus had operated alone for so long, trust was almost a foreign concept. Yet here he was, planning high-risk operations with two alien princesses who should have been his targets. When I was hired to kill you, he said slowly, this wasn't exactly what I had in mind. Celeste laughed, the sound like chiming crystals. Life's full of surprises. Speaking of which, she exchanged a meaningful look with her sister. Lyra's scales flushed with colors Marcus hadn't seen before. We've been meaning to discuss something with you, Marcus, about Centaurian biology and certain compatibilities we've discovered in our research. Marcus felt the conversation shifting into unexpected territory. But before they could continue, alarms blared throughout the base. Celeste's eyes widened as she accessed the security feeds. Imperial Strike Team, she reported. They found us. The moment shattered as they rushed to battle stations, but Marcus caught the lingering looks from both sisters and knew that something profound had shifted between them. If they survived the coming fight, life was about to become even more complicated than he'd imagined. The Imperial Strike Team never knew what hit them. Marcus's combat training had transformed the rebel base's defenders into an effective fighting force, and Celeste's technomantic abilities gave them an overwhelming advantage. Within hours, the attackers were either captured or retreating. But as Marcus surveyed the aftermath with Lyra and Celeste, he knew this was just the beginning. Your father's testing our defenses, he said, examining a fallen Imperial soldier's equipment. The real attack will be much worse. Then we need to move faster, Lyra replied, her scales shimmering with determination. The Helios operation can't wait. Every day we delay gives Father more time to find the cache. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus drilled the strike teams relentlessly, while Lyra coordinated with their growing network of allies. Celeste worked herself to exhaustion, pushing her technomantic abilities to new limits as she prepared to breach the palace's defenses. But it wasn't all strategic planning and combat training. In quiet moments, the connection between Marcus and the sisters deepened. He found himself drawn to Lyra's quiet strength and strategic mind, while Celeste's passionate brilliance and quick wit captivated him. The sisters, in turn, were fascinated by his humanity, so different from their own species, yet compelling in ways they'd never expected. One evening, as they reviewed battle plans, Celeste suddenly swayed on her feet. Marcus caught her before she fell, concerned by the unusual warmth of her scaled skin. I'm fine, she insisted, but her typically bright eyes were dulled. Just tired. Lyra touched her sister's forehead, scales shifting with worry. You're burning up. This is more than fatigue. They took Celeste to the medical bay, where the rebel doctors ran tests. The results shocked everyone. Celeste was pregnant, and scans showed the child was a hybrid, part human and part Centaurian. Before they could process this revelation, Lyra herself began showing similar symptoms. Further tests confirmed she too was carrying a hybrid child. Marcus sat heavily in a chair, mind reeling. How is this even possible? Centaurian biology is adaptive, Lyra explained, her scales flushing with complex emotions. Our species can bond genetically with compatible races. It's rare, but not unprecedented. Our father will be furious, Celeste added with a weak laugh. The purity of the imperial bloodline was always his obsession, and now his daughters are carrying human children. The news spread quickly through the rebel base. To Marcus's surprise, instead of scandal, there was celebration. The hybrid children were seen as living symbols of unity between humans and Centaurians, proof that the two species could create something beautiful together. But their joy was short-lived. That night, As Marcus stood watch over the sleeping sisters, every alarm in the base screamed to life. Celeste's eyes snapped open, glowing with technomantic connection. "The Emperor," she gasped. "He's coming." The entire Imperial fleet. The space above Novara filled with warships. Emperor Nexus had decided to end the rebellion personally, leading his forces in a massive assault. As the first bombardment began, Marcus knew they had minutes to evacuate. "Get them to the ships," he ordered the rebel troops, helping Celeste to her feet while Lyra coordinated the evacuation. "Move." The base erupted in chaos as Imperial forces landed, led by the Emperor himself. Marcus had never seen Nexus in person. The hologram hadn't done justice to his terrifying presence. The Emperor's scales blazed with rage as he cut through rebel defenders, 4 arms wielding energy blades with lethal precision. "You dare taint my bloodline, human?" Nexus roared, his voice shaking the walls. "I will erase you and these abominations from existence." Marcus stood his ground, buying time as the sisters and their people fled to the evacuation ships. "Your daughters chose this," he shouted back. "They chose freedom over your tyranny, the future over your traditions." The Emperor's attack was devastating, his enhanced strength and combat implants, making him nearly unstoppable. Marcus fought desperately, using every trick and skill he'd learned in his years as an assassin. But he was outmatched, driven back step by step. A technomantic surge suddenly disrupted the Emperor's combat systems. Celeste stood in a doorway, her powers amplified by desperate need. "Get to the ship," she cried. Marcus didn't waste the opportunity. He sprinted for the landing pad where Lyra had the Shadowhawk's engines hot. They lifted off as Imperial forces breached the base, weapons fire streaking past them into space. As they jumped to hyperspace, Marcus held both sisters close, feeling the new life growing within them. They'd lost their base and many good people, but they'd survived. More importantly, they had something precious to fight for, a future where their children could grow up free of the Emperor's hatred. "He'll never stop hunting us now," Lyra said softly, her hand intertwined with Marcus's. "Let him come," Celeste replied with fierce determination. "We're fighting for more than ourselves now." Marcus nodded, knowing they were right. The war had become personal in ways none of them had expected. But as he looked at the sisters, his partners, his lovers, the mothers of his children, he knew he would tear the Empire apart with his bare hands to keep them safe. News of the Imperial attack on Novara spread like wildfire across the galaxy. But it wasn't the destruction that captured people's attention. It was the reason behind it. The Emperor's own daughters, carrying hybrid children with a human father. The story became legend overnight, a symbol of hope for everyone who dreamed of a universe without the Empire's rigid hierarchies. Aboard the Shadowhawk, now part of a growing rebel fleet, Marcus watched Lyra and Celeste at work in the command center. Their pregnancies were beginning to show, their scaled bodies adapting in fascinating ways to accommodate the hybrid children growing within them. Despite the constant danger, both sisters seemed to glow with an inner light. "The Helios system is ready," Lyra announced, her tactical displays showing troop movements across the sector. "The miners have already disabled 2 Imperial garrisons. They're just waiting for our signal." Celeste's fingers danced through holographic data streams. "And I've finally cracked the location of the ancient cache. It's hidden in an abandoned mining complex on Helios Prime." The Empire's archaeological teams were looking in the wrong place entirely. Marcus studied their intel. "Your father will expect us to go after Helios. He knows about the cache now. He'll have his best forces waiting." "That's exactly what we're counting on." Lyra smiled, her scales shimmering with anticipation. "Show him the rest, sister." Celeste's technomantic abilities pulled up new displays. "While father focuses on Helios, look what's happening across the Empire. Every system we contacted, every governor and admiral who secretly opposed him, they're all ready to move. The moment we strike at Helios, the real revolution begins." The scope of their plan took Marcus's breath away. Dozens of systems would revolt simultaneously, splitting the Imperial forces. Even Nexus couldn't be everywhere at once. The people need a symbol, Lyra said softly, taking Marcus's hand. What better than two imperial princesses and their human lover, fighting for a future where their children, and all children, can live free? Their quiet moment was interrupted by a proximity alarm. A single ship had dropped out of hyperspace nearby, an imperial diplomatic vessel broadcasting surrender signals. "It's Admiral Vex," Celeste reported, her technomantic senses probing the ship. "Father's most trusted commander, and our mother's brother." Marcus tensed. It could be a trap. No, Lyra's scales shifted with emotion. "Uncle Vex raised us after Mother died. If he's here, there's a reason." They allowed the ship to dock. Admiral Vex was an imposing Centaurian, his scales dulled with age, but his bearing still proud. He dropped to one knee before the sisters. "My princesses," he said, voice heavy with formality. "Your father has gone mad. After your escape, he began purging anyone he suspects of disloyalty. The palace runs red with blood. I can no longer stand by and watch." Vex reached into his uniform and withdrew a data crystal. "Complete schematics of the palace defenses, security codes, patrol routes, everything you need to strike at the heart of the Empire." "Why?" Marcus asked, still suspicious. Vex's multifaceted eyes fixed on him. "Because I see how you look at them, human. The same way their father once looked at their mother, before power poisoned his soul. And because," he gestured to their swollen bellies, "these children deserve a better future than their grandfather's hatred." The Admiral's defection changed everything. With his intimate knowledge of Imperial operations, their plans crystallized into something even bolder. "We don't just strike at Helios," Lyra declared in the war council that followed. "We split our forces. One group secures the cache, while the other hits the capital itself. With the defense codes, we can bypass the palace shields. The Empire's strength is their unified command," Celeste added. "Cut off the head, and the body falls," Marcus finished. He looked at the sisters, his partners, his future. "But your father will be ready. He'll throw everything he has at us." "Let him." Lyra's scales blazed with determination. "We have something worth fighting for." That night, as their fleet prepared for battle, Marcus held both sisters close. Their hybrid children moved within them, a promise of tomorrow. Whatever came next, he knew these moments were worth any price. "I never thought I'd find this," he admitted quietly. "A cause worth dying for, a family worth living for." "Then live," Celeste whispered, touching his face. "Live and help us build something new from the ashes of the old empire." Lyra's scales rippled with love and fierce protection. "Together, we're stronger than any force in the galaxy. Together, we'll give our children the stars themselves." As they drifted to sleep, Marcus knew the coming battle would reshape the galaxy. But his thoughts weren't on empires or ancient caches. They were on the miracle of finding love in the most unexpected places, and the future growing within the remarkable women who had transformed his life from assassin to father, from mercenary to revolutionary. Tomorrow would bring war. Tonight was for hope. The imperial capital blazed with weapons fire as the revolution reached its climax. Marcus led the assault on the palace while the sisters, now in their final months of pregnancy, coordinated the attack from the Shadowhawk. Their forces had split as planned, half securing the ancient cache on Helios Prime, the other half striking at the heart of Empire itself. "Palace shields are down," Celeste reported, her technomantic abilities stretched to their limit. "Security systems are blind. Now, Marcus." The rebel strike team breached the palace defenses exactly as Admiral Vex had outlined, but Emperor Nexus was waiting. He stood in his throne room, combat systems humming with power, 4 arms holding ceremonial blades that crackled with energy. "I should have killed you myself, human," Nexus snarled. "Instead, I'll rectify that mistake before my grandchildren pollute my bloodline." "Father, stop." Lyra's voice rang through the palace communications. "This ends today, but it doesn't have to end in blood. You dare call me father? Nexus roared. You, who betrayed everything I built, who lay with this human. We chose love over hatred. Celeste's voice joined her sister's. We chose the future over the past. You can still be part of that future. But Nexus was beyond reason. He attacked with devastating force, his enhanced strength and combat implants making him nearly unstoppable. Marcus fought desperately, using every skill he'd learned in his years as an assassin, but the Emperor's rage was overwhelming. A blade sliced through Marcus's defenses, drawing blood. Another strike sent him sprawling. Nexus raised his weapons for the killing blow. Suddenly, the Emperor's combat systems flickered. Miles above, Celeste had found a way through his defenses. In that moment of vulnerability, Marcus struck. His blow wasn't meant to kill. Instead, he disabled Nexus's primary combat implants. You're finished, Marcus said, standing over the fallen Emperor. Your fleet is in chaos. The people have chosen freedom. Then kill me, Nexus spat. Complete your victory. No, Lyra's voice was firm. You'll live to see the galaxy we build, to know your grandchildren, to understand that love is stronger than hate. Reports flooded in from across the Empire. The simultaneous rebellions had succeeded beyond their hopes. System after system declared independence from Imperial rule. On Helios Prime, their forces had secured the ancient cache, its power now protected from those who would misuse it. The war was over. Months later, Marcus stood in the palace gardens, now transformed from a private imperial sanctuary into a public space of peace and renewal. In his arms he held his son, born of Lyra, his scales a fascinating mix of human and Centaurian features. Beside him, Celeste cradled their daughter, whose eyes already showed signs of her mother's technomantic gifts. Lyra joined them, her scales shimmering with joy as she embraced her family. The council's session went well, she reported. The new constitution has been ratified. The systems will remain united, but through choice and cooperation, not force. And father? Celeste asked softly. He asked to see them. Lyra smiled. The children. I think he's finally beginning to understand. Marcus looked at his family. These remarkable women who had transformed him from assassin to partner, from mercenary to father. Their children, living proof that love could bridge any divide. And beyond the garden walls, a galaxy being reborn. When I took that contract, he mused, I never imagined it would lead to this. Celeste laughed, the sound like chiming crystals. The best adventures never go as planned. And the best families, Lyra added, are the ones we choose. Their children stirred, reaching for each other with tiny hands that represented everything they had fought for. Human and Centaurian, love and revolution, past and future, all merged into something new and wonderful. Above them, the stars beckoned, not as conquest to be won, but as a legacy of hope for the generations to come. The Empire was gone, but in its place stood something far stronger. A family that had dared to dream of change, and a galaxy ready to embrace it. Marcus held his loves close, knowing that every sacrifice, every battle, every moment of doubt had led to this. He was no longer the lone assassin, but part of something greater. A story of transformation that would be told across the stars for generations to come. The contract that should have ended in death had instead given birth to life, to love, to revolution. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.